Hello, Mikey and I are so excited. We have Blaine Bartlett with us today. Oh,
Yeah,
how are you, Blaine?
I'm
yeah. How
doing
are you?
really well, Julianne. Mikey, it's good to see you.
Great to see you. Just so you guys know, Blaine's been an inspirational leader, working with leaders, an executive coach for over 44 years. We're so excited to have him today. And Blaine, if you could tell us a little bit about your current book, now there's a structure in the book that you work that people can work on themselves for 52 weeks. Is it?
Yeah. This is actually. I'm glad you mentioned this. It's my fifth book. My previous one is over my right shoulder here. Compassionate Capitalism, #1 bestseller on Amazon internationally. It was one of the fastest selling books in Amazon's history. I mean, we're really proud of that one. This book is the leadership guidebook, if you will, to how you actually structure a compassionately capitalistic organization. So it's organized around, and I take it literally from the title, the mindset. It's what's the mindset that a leader needs to have in order to effectively lead this kind of an organization that's socially responsible, that is doing no harm in the broadest sense possible, and it's a different take on leadership. The way that we've defined leadership in the book, and it's the way that I work with my clients, it's the activity, both the art and the science, of co-creating coordinated movement in a system. And there's two pieces to that. The co-creation piece, which is ownership transference. It's the idea that you want to have executed on. How do you transfer the ownership? So that's a co-created process. And then the coordinated movement, which is where some of the skill dynamics come into play. So the book is organized into 52 weekly practices that take that notion of co-created coordinated movement and literally chunks it down into ways that you can begin to practice on an ongoing basis in order to shift your mindset. Mindset gets developed out of practice. I mean, and it's usually something that we're practicing unknowingly. We watch somebody and we say, well, let's just follow that. And that's how a lot of leaders ended up developing themselves. What we're talking about is it takes conscious choice to have a different kind of mindset. And that's what this book is designed to achieve.
Love that. So something that I think sets your book apart from other, say, leadership books or even self-help is that it's more of a study versus information. So would you mind speaking about that?
Yeah, the information is in the Compassionate Capitalism book, but the study itself is, take for example, I've broken it down into basically 5 different domains, if you will. I guess that's probably the easiest way to look at it. There's awareness, then there's context, communication, commitment, and trust. And these 5 elements, they form the acronym ACT, ACCCT, ACT. Leaders take action. So how do you take action on an ongoing, intelligent, and intentional way? And that's what we've done with this, is we've chunked it down into practices. The book is designed, it takes usually a quotation of some sort, and we'll take that quotation and then we'll say, for the week, run everything you're doing as a leader through that particular filter. And there's some guidelines in terms of how you go about doing that. And this is actually where we've constructed a mastermind to help with that process. And it's kind of a companion resource that allows people to actually practice intentionally with others this process and develop a different mindset as a consequence.
So that's your mindset mastermind, correct?
That's the Mindset Mastermind. It's it also is a 52-week. It's a year-long mastermind.
It's a really good deal, from what I hear. It's
yeah. I mean, Joe Polish is an example. Joe's a good friend. It's $100,000 for his mastermind. We've priced this thing at $197 a month. And
wow.
Real honestly, my intent with this is, particularly given what we're experiencing today with COVID and with the economic disruption and just, every social unrest, We need effective leaders more so than we've ever needed them before. And when I say effective leaders, I'm talking about co-creating coordinated movement. I'm not talking about command and control. I'm talking about a different kind of leadership that is inclusive. And
That's a
the
beautiful.
mastermind is a way that we're making that available. How do you learn how to do that? Well, people work with me, on a one-on-one basis, and they'll pay over $100,000 a year to work with me one-on-one. And that's not affordable to a whole lot of folks. Obviously, larger organizations can afford that kind of a fee structure. People, I want to have access. I want to make this accessible. So it's $197 a month, and you get a really good deal out of that. You get the book, you get a weekly hour a week with me and my partner. And then we've got an ongoing mastermind structure that we put together. So you're actually interacting on a weekly basis with people, discussing, exploring, and actually digesting and integrating these practices. Private membership group. There's a private Facebook group that we've incorporated. So it's a pretty good overall structure. It's really rich in content, and it's $197 a month.
Wow, that's an incredible deal, and thanks for being so giving of your time. I know, that's incredible. I mean, I encourage everybody to do this for sure.
I think it's a pretty good deal.
It is. As somebody who's joined a few masterminds in my time, that's an extremely generous offer. So you talk about practice and repetition. So what is it that you do for yourself as practice and repetition to being in your higher self and being able to co-create?
Yeah. Well, mindset, I'm not just going to put this in this context. Every one of us operates out of a mindset. It's our paradigm, it's our belief systems, values, all of that stuff kind of gets packaged together, and then it's literally our worldview. And our worldview determines how we operate and how we behave and how we function, and ultimately the results that we have in our life. Most people don't practice intentionally. They get up in the morning on the same side of the bed that they always get up on. They brush their teeth in the same way, using the same toothbrush. They drink coffee out of their favorite cup, and their day just kind of unfolds that way. The practice that I've got, and I've had this ritual for decades, literally. It's an intentional way to start the day, so I'm set up to win. Now, it doesn't mean that I win all the time, but it affects my state of being. It affects my outlook on life. So it starts with a morning meditation. Now, I used to, I've been meditating for over 40 years. And when I started, it would be a long meditation. I did sometimes an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. I get up real early to do that. Anymore, it's 10 to 15 minutes just to kind of get myself centered. And so that kind of starts the day. And then there's a writing and or reading practice. I study every morning. And it's usually a philosophy tract of some sort. My favorite right now is some work of Thomas Troward, his Edinburgh lectures. So I'll take one of those. Bob Proctor introduced me to Thomas Troward about 10 years ago, and I fell in love. I mean, he's really deep. You gotta chew on him to really kind of work with it. But I'll take one of his lectures and just read it. And I've spent 9, 10, 11 months on just one chapter of one of his lectures, and just kind of digest it, rewrite it, look at it. How does this apply to what I'm trying to do? I mean, that sort of thing. So the routine is meditation, and there's always a cup of coffee involved in there. So I'll make my coffee in the morning, but then there's writing and reading, and then I'm basically ready to go for the day. And I'll answer my emails in the morning, and then set aside a good chunk of time just to do some work. Take a lot of walks. I take a lot of breaks, and that's something that I've built in lately. We've got a lovely property here where I'm at, and so I just like getting outside and walking around. Nature is the best teacher I've ever had, and I like to get connected to it on an ongoing basis.
I love that.
Yeah, you mentioned something right now that I just absolutely love, and that's that you build in this extra time. It's not extra, but to relax and to enjoy nature and reconnect with yourself. And, you know, that a lot of people are so busy doing and being busy that they don't make that time. But wouldn't you say that that's fairly important, especially for creativity?
It is hugely important. We're so consumed with being busy that we begin to lose connection with being productive.
Mhm.
And productivity and busyness are two completely different things. Yeah, I tend to be a bit of a workaholic. I mean, I love what I do. My life is, my work is my life. I mean, it really is. So I don't really draw a distinction between what I do and who I am. It just kind of is a part of how I show up in the world. Um, but the idea of connecting to nature, I used to think that it was and this is a contextual shift. There's a distinction between spending time and investing time.
Mm.
And when you listen to yourself talk, that inner voice, how am I spending my time? You'd never want to be spending time because there's no return on time spent. There's always a return on time invested. So that little paradigm shift, that little contextual questioning, all of a sudden the TV gets turned off because I'm not getting anything back from that. I stopped doing surfing on Facebook or whatever it is that people do. There's no return to me on that. So, where am I investing my time? And there is going to be a return coming back, and that begins to move back into the whole notion of productivity. Yeah, am I actually being productive? Am I making impact? Am I having impact?
That. And it's a distinction that's very important. The way you speak to yourself, as you know, is extremely important. And, you know, spending is not the same as investing. What do you find with people in general, as far as when they have difficulties organizing their thinking?
When people have difficulty organizing their thinking, that's usually because two things. One, they're not clear about what they want.
Mm.
Yeah, people are typically far more clear about what they don't want, and a lot of their time is spent trying to make sure that doesn't happen, whatever it is. But the clearer I am about what I do want, the easier it is for me to become focused, and focused is where clarity is
Mm.
born. So there's that piece. The other piece is we have been seduced in this culture to think that multitasking is possible. It isn't possible. I mean, it really isn't. Not if you're going to be effective. So multitasking confuses the brain, and it also diffuses energy. And it's that diffusing of energy that lends itself to feeling chaotic, out of control, and tired. We don't get tired because we're do too many things. We get tired because we're not doing things that bring us alive in our life. And that's you got to pay attention to that.
It's so true. It's something that I was struggling with for quite a while. So I appreciate you putting words to that, because I know a lot of other people deal with that as well. Um, Out of curiosity, you know, I know that you've talked about this before, and the how your life goes and how we expect it to go on this particular path, to just straight line it. And then
Mm.
we get disappointed when it doesn't work out like that, and we're hard on ourselves. And how I would love for you to talk a bit about that, because I think it's very important for people to hear.
Yeah. We grew up, and I say we, this is colloquially, just in this culture, typically, we grew up with a story that success is a straight line process. It's this wonderful diagonal that if you stay on this ever increasing curve, get the right job, get the right car, get the right house, get the right spouse or partner. Yeah, all of these are benchmarks of success, and they tend to get ticked off on this little diagonal line that kind of goes up, ever increasing, ever better. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, life is messy. We're falling off that line all the time, and then we feel like we failed because we fell off the line. Nobody's on the line. So just kind of blow that one up.
Yeah.
Life is circular. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you think, I mentioned, nature has been I grew up on a farm. Nature's been the biggest teacher that I've ever had. And one of the very first things I learned very early on, very young, was there's some distinct seasons that seem to come into play. And I got curious, yeah, what's this about? And so you think about it as kind of a circular process. Yeah, it just keeps rolling. And what was alive once is now starting to become more abundant. It starts to look like it's dying and fading away, but lo and behold, it starts to regenerate and something else is coming back. Life is this kind of a process. And where I'm, being successful in my career, perhaps my relationship is starting to, go downward. So there's these cycles, and it's a cyclical process. Success is cyclical. And you think about it, Earl Nightingale talked about success being the continual realization of a worthy ideal, or the continual progress towards the realization of a worthy ideal. That's kind of what begins to occur. And we get trapped into, I have to be perfect. And that's what this line kind of infers. We are not meant to be perfect. We are meant to be progressive. Mm. And that's, progress is messy. One step forward, two steps back. Two steps forward, four steps back, then five steps. As long as I keep moving, do what I can, where I am with what I have, I'm always going to be successful in someday, assuming I know where I'm going.
Wow, I love that. So you were just a world's greatest motivator. How did that feel, and what did you learn from just the whole process of it, doing it?
Well, first of all, I was very honored to be asked to be part of the show. It was pretty stellar company. We had Bob Proctor, Mary Morrissey. Just kind of luminaries were pretty. Lisa Nickel. I guess honored would be probably where I would go with that. First of all, but secondly, I was just thrilled to be able to have a venue that was kind of a megaphone, a little bit larger megaphone. To be able to get some of the things out that I know to be true, that I'd like to have others experience as being true for themselves as well. And I think paramount amongst that, and this is one of the themes of my talk on that show, was that, and I put it in this context. There's about 7 billion people on this planet right now, round numbers, about 7 billion. In 100 years, every single one of them will be dead. And you just kind of go, what? And then you go, well, so that begins to bring into real strong relief. Nobody's getting out of this alive. And I don't mean this in deference to COVID or anything else. I mean, nobody's getting out of this experience alive. So this kind of goes back to, where am I investing my time? Time is a non-renewable resource. How am I actually using it? Mm-hmm. And I have choice about that. I do not have control, and this is another message that I worked with. I don't have control of what goes on around me. I really don't. I'd like to think that I do, but I don't. The only thing I can control are my thinking, my feelings, and my behaviors. My thinking, my feelings, and my behaviors. And all of that conspires to form kind of my attitude towards life. But those are the only three things that I actually have absolute control over. Everything else is a crapshoot. And if I get hung up on, saying it's not right, it's not fair, that stops me dead. From a motivational standpoint, motivation doesn't happen out there. Motivation happens in here. It's an inside-out process. How am I thinking? That's mindset. How am I behaving? That's a function of mindset. And how am I feeling? How I feel about something is determined by what I think about it. And what I think about it drives my behavior. So there's this very interesting dynamic.
Another one of the circles.
Exactly.
So that's how I first met you, was at the World's Greatest Motivators. And I was so impressed with your story and just, the way that you make things so obvious. What are some gems that you would love to give the audience that maybe, just like that, you seem to see a common thread that they don't understand, people don't seem to understand, and maybe just a little quick help?
Well, when you talk about, there's so many places I could go with that. Well, I kind of look at what's going on in the world today, and people are getting angry about things. I mean, there just seems to be this percolating low threshold of just pervasive anger slash fear, and that anger and both anger and fear are both secondary emotions. That'd be one way to think about it. They're secondary emotions that come out of the experience of feeling out of control. And when I feel out of control, another way of saying that is I've been knocked off balance. My default behavior tends to be one of reactivity. And that's what we're seeing a lot of right now is reactivity rather than intentional and mindful responsiveness. I mean, if people took the time to just stop for just a moment, get themselves recentered, and then respond in an intelligent way with an outcome in mind that is generative. How can the co-created coordinated movement? I act as a leader. So, that's what I'm looking for. I'm causing movement all the time. Is it in service of what I say I want?
Something that, speaking of leadership, since that's definitely your specialty, what would you say, because I know my thoughts, but what would you say to the person who says, well, I'm not in a leadership position?
Yeah,
I think we all are.
I get that question all the time, and it's because people confuse role with the activity of leadership, and they are very different. The role itself, is CEO, COO. I mean, you put up manager, whatever label you want to put on it, president or senator or take your pick. Those are just roles. They don't speak to how the person is being as a leader. Leaders cause movement. When you strip away all of the things that leaders actually do from a characteristic, from a personality, perspective. Mother Teresa was a leader. Mahatma Gandhi was a leader. Adolf Hitler was a leader. Pol Pot was a leader. Very different ways of doing it with some very different outcomes. You strip away, all of the stuff that we think that leaders have. And what you're left with is that it's an individual that is causing movement. That's all a leader is an individual that is causing movement. So by that definition, everybody is a leader. I mean, it's literally impossible to be with somebody and not be causing some kind of movement in and with that person. I mean, even when I go outside, I'm causing movement because the birds will move away from me, or they will move towards me, or I'm causing movement just by my presence. So I never entertain the question, am I a leader or not? It's a non-starter. You are, I am. The question is, am I effective? Am I getting the kind of movement I need to get the results that I say I want? And if it's a question of effectiveness, that's something I can learn to be better at. And there's ways to develop my leadership, which is a question of effectiveness.
So speaking of leadership as well, and continuing on with also the idea of repetition, what would be one thing, I know there's definitely more than that, but what would be one thing that people could do to improve, like as a daily habit or practice, to help improve their leadership skills?
One thing that would be very simple, get in touch with your breathing. I think just get in touch with your breathing. When you start to feel things stacking up on you, just kind of step, literally, metaphorically or physically, step back for a minute, take a breath in, and then take a longer breath out. Now, there's a physiological reason for this. When you breathe in, you start to activate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls the parasympathetic system in the body. It's all kinds of stuff goes into the parasympathetic system. But when you breathe out longer than the breath out is longer than the breath in, it begins to slow your heart rate down. So that long exhale starts to calm the system. And we are bodies of energy. And if we are running around with our hair on fire, we are causing a certain kind of movement before we ever open our mouth. If we slow things down and start to center and calm, we're also sending a message, and it's a different message that is easier to work with. So one of the easiest things I do with leaders that I work with is just get in touch with your breathing. Take a pause before you move, and it's that pause that allows you to respond rather than react. And this is where, you know, there's a whole body of information around emotional intelligence and in ways that all of this comes into play. But that's probably the simplest thing that I could suggest doing.
Simple, and it's hard to remember in the moment, but
Yeah.
at least for me. But then I'm like, whoa, you know, Gay Hendricks told me the other day that fear is just excitement without the breath. And I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. And
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. If you could just slow yourself down, and then you're not in the fight or flight response
Yep.
system, or, you know, you're actually responding instead of reacting. So I love that.
The breathing is, you know, breathing is so critical to the experience of living, yet we don't pay attention to our breathing. You know, I was sitting out on the deck the other day, and my grandson was with, you know, 12 years old, and you know, he said, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm watching the ocean breathe." And he looked at me and said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, I'm sit here with me for a minute." So let's watch the ocean breathe. And so we sat there, and yeah, I mean, there's just, you have to use your imagination a bit with this, but the idea is to begin to get in touch with the cyclical nature of life. And so he started noticing, you know, he could see the waves coming in, and he started, you know, making links to, you know, there is movement here, and there's a pattern to it, and there's a calmness that starts to set in. And when the ocean gets all roiled and everything else, people get frightened, and or they get curious, but there's the different quality to it. So how is it breathing right now? How is it breathing? How am I breathing?
I love that. I've never thought about it like that, but that's a very visual representation of the breath. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you can
Mikey?
watch the wind breathe in the trees.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of stuff.
yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't get over it. Is there anything else that you'd love to mention that we haven't touched on today?
Oh my goodness, so many things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just, you know, you know, shamelessly self-serving here. I mean, if people are interested in learning more about leadership, certainly, you know, pick up a copy on my website, blainebartlett.com. You can find information about the book, or you can just go to Amazon, the Leadership Mindset Weekly. And I'm pretty proud of the book. I think it's a really useful, practical way to begin to work with developing greater effectiveness as a leader.
Beautiful. And it chunks it down so people can actually follow along and do it without feeling overwhelmed. So I love that. And practice.
Yeah.
It all takes
Yeah,
practice.
and just practice. And they're easy practices. I mean, they you know, like I said, it just takes an idea and then uses the idea as the filter for the week. You know, just notice what you're noticing. You know, just pay attention. Notice what you're noticing. And in that awareness, more choice begins to emerge.
Well, Mikey, did you have any last questions, or?
Oh,
I mean, I've been hogging the question, so I want to make sure.
fine. We tend to ask a lot of the same things. So
We do, for sure. That's kind of cool. Well, Blaine, I just want to say thank you again for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you again.
Julianne, my pleasure. Mikey, absolutely anytime.
thank you so much.